Now champions, here is a prime example why sometimes silver faces you can bite off a little more than you can chew. So I've cleaned this eyelet, so basically a bit of alcohol. Repeat this process. You can see it's really milky and gross. Get off the excess, do that a couple of times. It looked absolutely terrible before I did this, crusty as. Get in there, now give it a bit of heat. You can see more crap comes out of it. Do that a few times until almost nothing comes out. You should have removed most of the contamination, but remember we're only working on the top of the board here, and if we had to remove this board, you're talking probably a full day in depopulating, cleaning and repopulating and reconnecting the board. So where you can get away with it, you try and do that. But then the next factor is there's been a few people who've been in here before and probably not the best techs, and you can see underneath here a little elephant's foot of solder. See that? So now how many of these eyelets across this board have that underneath, just waiting to short stuff out and move around? So, you know, these can be absolute, you know, never-ending stories to get reliable. And often people don't see what the big deal is. They think you're just trying to rip them off. There's just so much labour to get these things into the, you know, kind of condition I would like to see them in. So everyone sort of takes shortcuts, and you end up with, like, see, I can't get the little ball of solder in there. You end up with like 20 half jobs on an amp where you should have just pulled the trigger on the full works burger to begin with, and it'd be you know, an heirloom amp after that. But anyway, I digress, as they say. And you can see here this this cap that's been removed and just tack soldered to another bit of bus wire. That's the treble cap. They've tried to avoid using this eyelet here because it's right next to this plate supply. So that means it's likely that there's leakage in this area, and that was their way around it. Not very well implemented. We could probably do better there. But yeah, that makes it a bit of a red flag that this board is indeed conductive. Alright, so I've lifted the phase inverter coupling caps, and just going to try and do as much as we can without removing this board. That would be fantastic. Problem is you just can't get the solder from down the bottom of the eyelet. Doesn't look like there's any stalactites hanging down though, so that's promising. We'll get what we can with the desolder gun. Oh yeah, it's getting it all. Just got to give it some time to heat. I get the heat gun. See if we can soften it up a bit. Get the majority of it off. Really fiddly. All the old leads are grabbing the paper as you move it around. We've got rid of the big chunks of wax. Now we're just left with the flux. Alright, so I've managed to slide out the insulating board, and it's not too bad. There's a bit of wax there and a few more blobs of solder came out, but it's better out than in. So I'm going to clean that off. There's a bit of mildew there as well, mildew, fungus essentially, and on the back there. So we'll give that a soak and a clean, and I'll just have a look underneath, see if I can pry it up far enough to look underneath, just make sure there's no other big blobs of solder hanging down. Might use the mirror for that. But in this general area, we've managed to clean it up rather well. There's not as much wax on the bottom, but there's still wax, so you're only sort of doing half a job when you can do this, but literally like we did on the Silver Face Twin restoration just recently, you depopulate and remove these boards, reconnect them, you're talking like 2 whole days almost. So I'll reconnect everything here and see how it goes, and what I'll do is I'll locate the bias feeds off the board, so this this eyelet will go unused, and that'll give us a bit more space to this PI plate supply node there. Alright, I've just got like my dentist mirror thing here, having a look at the bottom side of the board, and you can see all the blobs of solder there, which is what I was afraid of. So yeah, I might figure out which eyelets they are and see if we can just remove as much as possible from the top side without having to take the whole board out. Joy. Alright, so there's no easy way to do this. This is probably the easiest way, and that's saying something. So I've got some isopropyl on the board here, and I've just got like an acid brush, just trying to work down in between the components without removing them to get the remainder of the contamination and dirt and flux and wax and God knows what else off the board, to try and give us a fighting chance of not having any conductivity. So what I've done is I've jammed a paper towel under the whole board. I've rolled it up, well, folded it into 3 sections and shoved it under there with like a long ruler all the way. So that's soaking up the excess alcohol, and just soaking it to scrub it at the moment, just to loosen everything off. Then I'll wipe off the excess or let it run off onto the towel, and then blast it with compressed air and repeat the cycle a few times until there's no gross residues left, or minimal anyway. So the components that are most sensitive to board leakage will heat the eyelets in that area and the local high tension wires, eyelets, and do what we did before with the alcohol, and repeat that cycle until it doesn't sizzle and pop and crackle anymore, indicating that most of the contaminants have been washed away. I say most because we'll never get all of them. Alright, so here's an example of what I'm talking about when I say clearing the holes. That's sizzling and stuff. You probably can't hear it in the lapel mic, but trust me, it is. Get the solder out of there. Alright, that hole cleared rather well. So now, get a bit of IPA, isopropyl alcohol. Just try and scrub off all that crap. It sort of dissolves the wax slowly. Should have scraped those big chunks off before doing it, but so you're left with that creamy, horrible, waxy mess. But it gets better the more you do it. Alright, that's looking a lot cleaner, but we'll apply heat at that eyelet again. Less stuff comes out, but still a bit. Smoke there as well. That's from the other side of the board. You can see it dry out there. That's the isopropyl evaporating and hopefully taking any moisture in the board along with it. looking quite a bit better. So that white stuff there, that's wax that's been dissolved in the alcohol, and when the alcohol evaporates it leaves behind a fine film of that wax and a little bit of heat. It disappears. It looks like a pretty fresh board after that. Now we only really have to do this to the parts of the board where there's massive voltage differentials that will cause havoc if they're left there. So the rest of the board, we'll give it a clean. As you can see there, it's still pretty manky. But yeah, probably don't have to go full on with that treatment of the eyelets for every connection, thank God. The other thing that's annoying about the wax coated eyelet boards is the old Visi filter there on the paste gets blocked up really quickly. So that sucks. It goes in gas form up the tube and then condenses on the filter element and blocks it pretty rapidly. So you're changing one of them every, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a day to maintain suctivity. Alright, so we've cleaned the board up quite a bit now. I think that's going to help a lot. Certain areas like this, so this is a coupling cap coming from the vibrato channel EQ, that's the treble cap, and right here is pretty sensitive to any DC, and here's the plate supply for something or other, V3 and 2, sorry, and you've got this link wire here. So this has got the plate supply here, and then there's your 2 plate resistors, and that's right next to this pretty sensitive spot here that's going off to the treble pot. So that could leak some DC here, resulting in scratchy behavior of the EQ knobs. So what I'll do is get rid of this link wire, lift these wires, put them over here if we can fit them in that hole, and just leave this eyelet unused, so there's no leakage path between these 2 points here. Now on the normal channel, it's not an issue because the supply goes straight over here. This cap is normally in that eyelet. I've removed it for cleaning, but I'll put that back in and a link wire will go up there, and that is the sensitive area there. And that's got a fair bit of distance between it, so we probably will be right in that respect. And you've also got a screw going into the chassis there, which is a ground point. So this one's probably fine. This one over here, we want to remove this little path here by removing the wires from the eyelet. Now the bias feed, I've left this resistor in place for now. What I'll probably do is change that with a trim pot and an end stop resistor so we can have bias balance as well as overall bias adjustment. But I've removed the bias feed resistors from that eyelet there. They normally went in like a triangle there. I've mounted them under heat shrink directly to those eyelets, so there's less chance of the plate supply for the PI bleeding through this path and causing bias drift to the output valves, which is another big problem with this layout. But overall, a little bit more cleaning to do still, but it's a lot better than it was, so I reckon that's going to help us in the long run. Just weirdness, like it's not necessarily going to be a catastrophic fault, but what it does is leakage in the board will just make the next triode not biased properly, and the grid will not be at 0 volt, so that can lead to weird distortions and just strange behavior. So we've got a fighting chance that she's going to be pretty good from the get-go. I dare say there's going to be stuff that will need sorting out, but you know, that's always the case with these old Restos that are coming in pretty bad condition. Alright, so I've changed the input jacks. Nice new shiny Switchcrafts. They kind of look a bit out of place now, don't they, next to the rusty screws, but you know, they're reliable. Got some new resistors on there. I was going to reuse the old ones, but they're just a bit mangled once I removed the solder. Now I'm about to reattach the coax, but it is so stiff. It's like, it feels like fencing wire. It feels like if I bend it, it's going to break, and you can see it goes white there. It's just cooked. And this, I don't know how Fender found the worst coax known to man, but this stuff sucks. It's got this black crap on the shield, and it's just really hard to solder with. And the internal insulation likes to melt while you're soldering to it. yeah, it's just not great coax to begin with, so I think I'll replace that with some new stuff that's actually, you can actually flex. Oh, hello, focus. I just upped the speed of the autofocus and it seems to have gone even slower. Yay, Panasonic. I think I'm going to switch to Sony. I'm kind of getting a bit jack of this, eh? Alright, so I've removed the coax. I'll put some new flexible stuff in there. You can see how really stiff that is. It's like no chance of getting that to behave. It almost feels like it's going to snap when you bend it. And it sort of goes discoloured as you bend it real hard. But yeah, I don't know what it is with Fender and this stuff. Just the jacket melts. It's got this weird black stuff on it. It's like the tin in the braid corrodes and solder doesn't stick to it. You got to wash it with solvent to have any chance of the solder sticking to it. So we'll just throw this stuff in the bin and put some proper Mogami or whatever I've got floating around in there. Anything's better than that. So I've had to lift the tone stack caps here for the vibrato channel. We may as well do it now while everything's in disarray. There was just big blobs of solder and everything. Someone had cut off the old bypass caps and the cathode resistors and just left the leads there and then just put a big blob of solder on them and then just tack soldered these to that. Like, why not just remove the solder? It's just every single joint has just got that kind of workmanship on it, so it's like, where do you stop? But anyway, so it's cleaned up rather well under there. It's got a bit of that white residue, but now when we put the soldering iron in the eyelet, only a little bit of that wax comes back out. We might do a few more cycles there, but that was really messy when we first did it. Just a big pool of wax rose to the top. So yeah, we're getting there slowly. It's not a enviable job, but it's kind of necessary, particularly in the front end.